Okay, we're on Daf Ayin Dalet in the middle of the Mimer, where we continue the theme of the three different forms of tshuva. So at Ois Gimel, the Alter Rebbe begins. The third form of tshuva is that even after a person has achieved Sur Meirav, avoiding evil in the ultimate fashion, and also the Asay Toiv in the ultimate fashion, going beyond their routine and ovid, there's still yet a third level of tshuva, which is alluded to in the pasuk that says, "Return to me, and I will return to you." And as explained, that all a person's days, the Gemara tells us, should be engaged in tshuva. Now, this is not to suggest that it's tshuva for Averis, because it wouldn't be all of his days. But it's tshuva in the sense of return from distance, that even though a person is already in the level of Eisa Toiv, and he's doing all of the mitzvahs, there can still be a sense of the person having their own identity, of being a yesh and a dover. Even if that yeshus is driven towards love, it's still a yesh misha oyev. And tshuva is, like Shlomo HaMelech writes, that the spirit returns to Hashem, Ruach Toshav Elikim. That is, that a person longs to return to Hashem, to this level where Hashem, the Jewish people, were the initial idea that Hashem created the whole world. And therefore, it is his desire to be attached to the Or Ein Sof, which is higher even than the levels of godliness that are accessible through Amalik Kol Almin and Seviv Kol Almin, which are still going to be Almin, levels of diminished awareness. Like the statement in the bracha we make in davening, we want to elevate ourselves outside of this world. This is similar to what's described when it says by Kriyas Yamsuf that the pasuk reads ad yaver amcha havaya, till they passed the people of Havaya. And Chassidus explains it to mean that it is higher than even a level of Havaya, because Havaya is still Yud Chachma, etc. All the different levels of Tzimtzum and Espashtus, etc. And it's still the level of Seviv Kolam. And the Kriyas Yamsuf, there was a revelation that was far greater than that, higher even than the level of Seviv Kolam, where the sea was turned into the dry land, that the Alma Disgasia, the sea, which is commonly the hidden world, became revealed. Like it says in the Zayir, Parshas Shlach, on the pasuk, quote, "Is there Hashem amongst you or not? Hayesh Hashem b'kebenu im ayin," that the level of ayin is a far loftier, more intense personal level of the Hashem, even more than the Shem Havaya. Now, the source of all neshamas is from this stage. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, mi ayin ba'asa, know that you come from ayin, and ein mazali Yisrael, that trickles down from the Levinon. This is from this level, or this is realized through this great level of tshuva, that a person wants to be subsumed once again in the Or Ein Sof, shuva elai, back to Hashem in his essence. Now, this level of tshuva is a reference to Torah, which is called the original dominant force, Mashal Kadmoni, which is a mechanism of illustrating the preeminence of Hashem, that which is not capturable within the level of worlds, which is Atzmas Or Ein Sof. And that's why the Gemara says that if a person engages in Torah, he brings about peace in the upper spheres and the lower spheres. What does it mean in the upper spheres, the Pamayo Shamayla? So it's explained that is bringing about unity between Seviv and Mamalek, because it is a hamshacha of the highest level, even more than Seviv Kolam and Mamalek Kolam. Now, through mitzvahs, we draw down a level of makif, but through Torah, we draw it down to the pnimius. Like it says, the Torah is in his belly. It is within the person, as if the Kedusha rests within him. And this is what it says in the Maimer Chazal, that Hashem will forgive a person for Avodah Zarah, for Gili Arayas, even for murder, but not for denigrating Torah. That is, just like within a person, there are the external limbs and there are the internal organs that a person's identity, his very life depends on, which is not the case with his external limbs. That even if, God forbid, a person's hand was cut off, he would be damaged, but he could still live. However, his internal organs, if they are punctured, the lung or the brain, etc., the person would not be able to live, because that's where his ikar neshama is. We're now on Amid Beis. So too, with Hashem, mitzvahs are called the limbs of the king. That is, they are kelim, and they are the external limbs, but Torah, which is the wisdom of Hashem, is called the inner organs of Hashem. It's not just the expression of Hashem, but it's the Or Ein Sof that is malubish in the Chachma. And that's why Hashem will not tolerate the denigration of Torah. And this is what it says in the story of Matan Torah, in the Aseret Dibros, quote, Anochi Hashem Likecha, meaning Hashem Likecha, that is Seviv Kol Amim Kol Amin, but Anochi, that's Atzmis Or Ein Sof, that is higher than Seviv Kol Amin. And this is revealed in Hashem Likecha, that the level of Havaya is drawn out from the level of Anochi. Like it says in Till, Mimamakim Karasicha Hashem, from the depths I cry out to you. That is, from Atzmis Or Ein Sof, that from there it draws out to Hashem Elikecha through involvement in Torah, which this is from the level of the depth. Like it says, from the ultimate depths are his thoughts. Like it says in the Medrash, happy is the person who has the Torah, the words of Torah protect him, regarding which it says, Mayim Amukim, deep waters. This is the advice within the heart of the person. Like it says, Mimavakim Karasicha Tfila La'ani, and so on. That is, through tshuva first, that which will lead a person to be engaged in Torah, pure lishma, in order that the involvement of Torah, his learning of Torah, should be after and uplifted by the rus of the liba. And this is indicated when we say a bracha. We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. Atah is Mahusavatz Musa, high even the Shem Havai, should be brought down into Hashem and into Elokeinu. So now the Alter Rebbe summarizes this third level of tshuva, which is a reference to returning to Atzmis Or Ein Sof, that is higher than Soviv and Mamale, this level that we bypass even the level of Havaya to Shuva Elai, Mamash to the Eibishter himself, and this is achieved through engagement in Torah, which is comparable to the inner organs. Now, all three levels of tshuva can be referred to as Bechor. Bechor, of course, means firstborn. It also is divisible into the letter Beis, which represents the single digits, Chaf, which represents the tens, Chaf being 20, 30, 40, and Reish, which represents the hundreds. So you have the single digits, the tens, and the hundreds. Now, in these three levels of tshuva, they reference to the three levels of the neshama, and the level of Asiya and Yetzira and Bria. And these are the three levels of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. So we explained how they have to be elevated through the levels, the three different forms of tshuva. The first level of tshuva that we discussed was Someira, avoiding evil. That's the Nefesh level. That's the world of Asiya. And that is, do no harm. That is, a person is subject to or vulnerable to Avera because he lives in this physical world where it's dominated by Klipa and the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, a person might chas v'sholom do mamash avedas, like it says, the soul that does avedas, and his tshuva is to uproot this evil from within his heart. And through uprooting this, he arouses within Hashem that there should be no opportunity for the chitzenim to steal away kedusha. The second level of tshuva is shaykh to the level of ruach and the level of yitzira, and the third level of tshuva to the level of the neshama, or the neshama level of the neshama. And therefore, it has to come from a depth of a heart, because when the level of neshama falls, it falls that much deeper. Like the Maggid says, that the distracting thoughts, the machshava zoros of tzaddikim gemurim, are more harmful than the harsh avedas of an amaretz. That Hashem is so much more particular with the behaviors of those in his inner circle. And this is indicated in the three letters of Beis, Chaf, Reish. Again, the single digits, the tens and the hundreds. Because Bria, which is the neshama, the level of neshama, which includes the level of the 10 spheres within the 10 spheres, 10 times 10 in the hundreds. And Yetzira is only the 10 spheres, the tens, and Asiya is only the single digits. And again, this is indicated in the Eitz Chaim, that Asiya is only the individual digits, as is described. Now, these three letters, Beis, Chaf, Reish, are alluded to in the brachas that we make, because it's the same three letters rearranged to get you the word Baruch. That is the drawing down of Atah Havaya Lekeinu, which is alluded to in the level of Baruch, Baruch, B'chayrasi, B'chasi, my firstborn, my blessing. And this is why we are obligated to dedicate every firstborn, Kaddish Li Kol B'char, that we should elevate these three levels of Biyah, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, through the three levels of Tshuva. And we should identify the godliness that is dispersed within them and raise it up to the level of Atzilus. And this is what it means, O Kaddish Li, sanctify to me. And this is through the superiority of a moment of Torah and Tshuva in this world that identifies the godliness out of the darkness and adds to that light. We're now on Amid Gimel, that we say regarding these three levels of tshuva, of nefesh, ruach, and neshama, the three levels of daughter, sister, and mother. What is this additional light that is drawn out of the darkness? That is, through transforming the darkness into light, we draw down a greater level of light from Atzilus, that the darkness becomes light. And from this level of Kaddishli called Bechor, we draw down from above a level of Rechev, again, the same three letters, which is this idea of being totally batal to Hashem, like the Merkava, which is drawing down from Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama in the level of Atzilus. And again, as indicated in various psukim. And all of this is through taking the Bechora, because Esav was the Bechor. So, but Yaakov took the Bechor right away from Esav, he's taking it away from Klipa. That we have to take it, and how do we take it? Through tshuva. Through uprooting any taivas for Olam Hazeh, both on the level of Somei Ra, as well as in the active level of Kaddish Li and Kaddish as Atzmacha B'Mutalach, your entire identity, even in that which is permitted. And this is in the passion and the desire and the asay toiv and the engagement of Torah, through which a person takes away the bechor, that is the distraction, from the Esav level, because the Yetzer Hara and Klipa also get from the Ratzon Elye. If not, they wouldn't be able to exist. And on the contrary, in a certain sense, they rise up to a higher level because of Hashem's abundant kindness, and that's why they can raise up like the eagle. And when a person removes this passion from Taivas Olam Hazeh, that he doesn't want them at all, he also effectuates a residual impact from Hashem that he no longer supports the Klipa and the Taiva. Now, this kayach is because the Yidden were the whole purpose of creation, all of machshav tchila. And therefore, even when we are in Gullus, even when we are on the Nar Kvar, and again, Chaf Vei's Reish, the same letters, we still remain in the Machshava HaKadayma, even when the Yidden are in Gullus. And this is why it says, Hashem is my shadow, that just like a shadow that follows after the person, so too Hashem shadows us. So the person, when he removes his taiva from Ra, he evokes a response from Hashem. And this, that he has the ruts and then the chayfetz and asay toiv, this causes that Hashem should also only have a rutzai in Kedusha. How does a person uproot this rutzai? So like it says in the story of Yaakov getting the bracha from Yitzchak, that Yitzchak told Esav, your brother came with trickery. That is, that there shouldn't be any brotherliness with Olam Hazeh, with eating and drinking and so on. It should only be trickery, as if you are compelled to eat and drink and engage in this physical world, because that is really a descent of a person's capacity. But since he needs to be mavar the berurim, so therefore he eats so that he can have the power to go and do mitzvahs with the energy that he derives from eating, but he is not a brother with eating. In the Kitzur, we explained that the three levels of tshuva reflect nefesh, ruach, and neshama, and these are the single digits, the tens and the hundreds, the nekudis, the svidis, and the combination of svidis. And this is why we are told kaddishli, to dedicate to Hashem, through the subsuming them within the level of Atzilus, that level of Kaddish. And through uprooting any passion for anything of Gashmis, we cause that Hashem similarly uproots any distribution of Kedusha to these to Klipa, and this is alluded to in the three letters of Reish Chaf Veis, to be a total subservient to Hashem, even if we are in distant places, and that is effectuated through the three levels of tshuva that bring us to the level of daughter, sister, and mother. Now, in Hey, we return to the pasuk, Mateva Alecha Yaakov. That is, the two levels of tshuva of avoiding evil and doing good are the levels of Yaakov, where we take the lofty level of Yud and we bring it into Akev, because that's all about the deed, that we avoid the bad and we do the good, that through this we draw down the Yud into the level of Akev. And Yaakov is also in every circumstance, even in the lowest levels, but Yisrael is the level of Li Roish, which is the level of Moichin, the three higher levels of Chabad, like it says in Likkutei Torah of the Arizal on the end of Parshas Vayetze. that every place that you have the 7 tachtonis, which is a reference to the midos, we call them Yaakov. The Zayin tachtonis are in the levels of ruach and nefesh, and the gimel rishonis, which is the Chabad, is in the level of neshama, and therefore these first 2 levels of tshuva, of the nefesh and the ruach, are the levels of Yaakov. And this is what it means. He has tricked me these 2 times. It is 2 levels of tshuva. And it is called Oyalecha, the 10th, which is a level of makif, because through mitzvahs we draw down the makifim. But it is not yet invested within it in bipnimius, that it should be amshach bipnimius through Torah. Like we know when it says that through mitzvahs we become kodesh, which is a drawing down of an or makif from the level of seviv kol almin, like the ring of marriage, the tabas kiddushin, a ring, a makif of kodesh, and through Torah we draw down to the level of pnimius, like on the day of the chasen is called the day of Matan Torah, because of the union between Hashem and the Jewish people, comparable to the union between bridegroom and bride. Through Surmeirah, we draw down this level of Elokeinu. It becomes ours. And through Asay Tov, we have a revelation of Shem Havaya. But it's still only a makif, like an oil. And this is why Yaakov is called Yeshiv Oyolim, 2 oils, the level of Havaya and the level of Akeinu. What then is Matoivu? That is when we have the level of Ma, which is total bittul, has no sense of self, a total Hatzne Lechasim Lekacha, total tznius. Then you have Toivu. What is the Toiv? The Toiv is that which is otherwise hidden. And as such, you have Mishkanesecha Yisrael, that you have this level of Yisrael, which is Sheikhim in the Pnimius Mamish, and not the level of Oyel and Makif. That is through the engagement in Torah. Like it says that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hashem has nothing except the Alamas of Halacha. That is, that Torah is where Hashem rests, B'pnimius v'shachanti b'seicha. And this is the idea of Yisrael li Roish, that first and foremost is the revelation of the Roish in the Moichen, and the general Chayis HaNefesh at the level of Pnimius. That the other limbs are only at the level of Makif, like thought, which radiates even down to the feet. That immediately when a person has an idea to go, his foot immediately responds without hesitation, because his thoughts penetrate all the way down to his foot. Nevertheless, it's only the level of makif, because of course the foot that has no understanding, it is only obedient. Whereas in the mind, there is clarity. And regarding this, we say he is called Yaakov, Yud down to Ekev, that through the mice that radiates in the Seviv Kolam, the level of Makif. But Yisrael is Li Rosh. Through engagement in Torah, he reveals the Seviv Kolam, the level of Pnimius Mamash. And this is what it means, that he is no longer called Yaakov. He's now called Yisrael because he sarisa, he battled. That is, he elevated himself over the level of Elohim. And he rose to that level, like we mentioned earlier in the Mimer, and that is why the Shem Elohim is the screen for Shem Havaya. Through engagement in Torah, he causes that there should be no blockage, because whoever engages in Torah, it's like Hashem is standing with him, and therefore he has elevated himself above the level of Elohim. However, the primary interpretation of the distinction between Eilech and Mishkanesecha is based on what it says. You should make these tapestries of goatskin for the tent over the Mishkan, that the Mishkan is these 10 tapestries that are sheish mashzar of blue and green. What is sheish? Is the idea of the 6 midos, from whence we draw out what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. And this is also the idea of the colors. Like Torah talks about Tailas Shoni, that is the power of the capacity to blend colors. But what then is the message of the tapestries made of goatskin that are called an oil? Because they are the berurim that we have been able to identify at the kedusha out of klipas nega through somiran asay toiv. Again, the first 2 levels of tshuva. Now the pasuk says, "Esav achi ish sa'ir." Esav, his brother, was a hairy man. This is the relevant to or comparable to the level of the goat's hair. That is, that it steals away the kedusha. In contrast to Yaakov, that he describes himself as smooth skin, chalak, which is similar to the idea of Chelek Hashem who's with him. But through the berurim of Sumeira Nasei Toiv, he is able to identify the kedusha from the hair of the goat, like it says, Yaakov put on the hairy goat skin. That is, that he made them into a protection. That is the quality of, with like the quality of Torah, that protects a person from the chitzenim. Like it says in the Gemara in Yavamis that Rabbi, when he was engaged in Torah, he lived for 40 years. Abaye, who engaged in Torah in his chasadim, lived a longer years. So too, those who are engaged in the work in the world, the Balak Eskim, they protect the Talmidei Chachamim who are sustained through their work. Another point we make that Oilecha, that it says in the Medrash in Parshas Nasai, Matova Alecha Yaakov is the oil moyed in the Midbar and in Shila and Noiv in Givay. But Mishkan Asechi Yisrael is the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. That oil moyed was just a temporary dwelling place of Hashem, but the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim was a permanent dwelling place. Levels of Yaakov and Yisrael, because the Bali Eskim, the people who are engaged in the working world, are called Yaakov, and then when they establish time for Torah, it's called the Diras Arai, temporary, because their main part of their day is working. And the Talmidei Chachamim, who are constantly engaged in Torah, that's their Diras Keva, that's their permanent fixture. And this is what it means, Vayakom Eidus B'Yaakov, the Torah Son B'Yisrael. He rose up the testimonies amongst Jacob and Torah amongst the Yisrael, the level of Torah itself, which is the highest level of Chachma, which is called the Heichal of Hashem, that the Orin Soif rests there constantly and is revealed into the level of Yisrael. But the level of Eidus, the testimonies, is only an insight from the Chachma Ilah, the little streams of Chachma that draw down to the level of Yaakov, and that's why it's called temporary. And the Alter Rebbe quotes other sources that Torah is called a bias, like it says, Atikre Banaich Elo Boinaich, not only children, but builders. And the Eitz Chaim says that the oilim, the tents, are a bridge between personal garments and a home. That when a person establishes time for Torah, it's only something within his day. It's called an oil. Again, it's like a bridge between the makif of a garment and the more profound makif of a house. But when he's engaged in Torah as his primary, then it's called boinaich. And this is what it means. Oyevei Hashem sharitziyim. We call Mishkanos Yaakov, like it says, Oyevei Hashem sharim hamatziyonim b'halacha. Hashem loves those who are proficient in halacha, more than even the shuls and the study halls, the Batei Medrash. This is like the virtue of Mishkan Asecha in comparison to Oyelecha of Yaakov, like it says, Magid Dvarav li Yaakov, only the words, but Chukav Mishpatav li Yisrael. And this is similar to the distinction between Eidus and Torah. We also could say, like we said earlier in the Maimer entitled Aboy Mishorish Yaakov, Yotzitz Ufarach B'Yisrael, that the level of tzmicha, of flourishing and blossoming that will be in the future is the level of Yisrael, and the revelation of Pnimis HaTorah, which is the Pnimis and Atzmis of Hashem, Dafke in the Lasad Lavai.